Hey y'all, in today's lesson, we're going to be talking about numeracy and also using some basic calculator skills. Numeracy in mathematics is like literacy in language. So numeracy is the ability to read and understand mathematics. And we can use numeracy skills to calculate, estimate, interpret, read, and translate mathematics into writing or vice versa. There's whenever you see an algebraic sentence, you can translate that into words or vice versa. So sometimes you might be given something into words and you need to calculate it with numbers. So you're going to be able to go back and forth, and we're just going to look at a few things today as to how to use a calculator to assist you in your numeracy skills. There are several different types of calculators. I have them circled here, and we're going to start with the most basic. So the most basic calculator you have is called a four function calculator, and it literally does four functions. It is going to be super basic. All it does is add, subtract, multiply, and divide. It may have like it's four functions. That's it. So when you open your calculator on your phone and it is in portrait mode, so up and down, it will be a four function calculator. Or if you go to the store and they have, sometimes they're like really big with really big numbers on them, and they're super, super inexpensive. Those are four function calculators. They're basic math type of thing. And then the next step up is the scientific calculator. And the scientific calculator is going to do a lot more. It's going to be adequate for chemistry, finance, accounting, basic math, stuff like that. So a scientific calculator does everything you need except graphing. Does everything except graphing. So you can get away with a scientific calculator in a lot of classes as long as there's no graphing required. Where the last step for calculators, the most expensive, the nicest calculator, the luxury vehicle of calculators are graphing calculators. Graphing calculators do everything. Several different brands for graphing calculators. Probably the one you would recognize the most would be a TI calculator, but lots of different brands that are equally as effective. Graphing calculators do everything, and depending on the type that you buy, it may do more than you could ever hope for. So graphing calculators are basically scientific calculators plus graphing, and it's going to do everything. These calculators are in the 20 to 40 price range. These calculators are in the 100 plus price range, and these calculators are like less than $10. But you kind of get what you pay for. So let's go down here. I have a couple examples down here. All of these examples can be done in a scientific calculator, and you won't need a graphing calculator, but if that's what you have, if you have a graphing calculator, then you can do all of these tasks. Describe how you can use a smartphone calculator as a four function calculator and a scientific. You might have already seen this in your phone, but when you open up your phone, if it's in portrait mode, so it's up and down, and you open that calculator, it's going to be a four function calculator. Then if you turn your phone sideways to landscape, it becomes a scientific calculator. So if you've bought a smartphone, then you also happen to buy a scientific calculator. So congratulations, you're a proud owner of two calculators. So four function is when your phone is up like this. And then when you rotate it like that, it becomes a scientific calculator. So that's kind of handy. And then that comes on your phone, installed on your phone usually. And then there are other apps that you can purchase. Some are free, but for the most part, you have to purchase graphing calculators. And the one that I use in my videos was free at the time that I got it, but it's no longer free, but it's great. Okay, we have a couple activities down here to where you are just practicing with your calculator, getting comfortable with it. And the reason why this is important is because your calculator is only as smart as you are. So if you don't input things correctly, then your calculator will give you the correct wrong answer, if that makes sense. And I have some examples down here demonstrating that. You have to be, in mathematics, you have to be very specific, and that applies to calculators. So if there's a parentheses that you see on the paper in a specific spot, then that has to translate into your calculator. And you have to understand the difference and understand mathematics to know that if you typed it in wrong, then you're going to get a wrong answer. And if you know enough about mathematics, then that should be like, oh, that's not right. That doesn't seem right. I must have typed it in wrong. Anyway, I want you to pause the video. I want you to try these on your own. And then when you're done, hit play and we'll go over them. Okay, so there's a couple of these that I just went ahead and wrote the answers to, and you can check them. They're probably pretty simple to type into the calculator. You can see on number 8, I have some squiggly equals. In mathematics, that means approximately. So that indicates that I have rounded. So on number 8, I rounded that number because it was really long, as you can see in this calculator. This calculator in my app or in my iPad screen is a graphing calculator. So that's what that screen looks like. It's got lots of stuff on it. All right, so a couple things, let's just go over. When you add 2 positive numbers, the result is always going to be positive. When you add 2 negative numbers, the result is always going to be negative. And if you're unsure how to test that, just pick some random numbers and check it out. So the sum of 2 negative numbers is a negative number. It doesn't matter what the number is. It just matters that you know that when you add 2 negative numbers, you end up with a negative number. When you add 2 positive numbers, you end up with a positive number. So that's some math literacy, some numeracy. Okay, number 3, I wanted to go over this because this one might be a little bit tricky, but dividing a number by 1/2 is the same as multiplying the number by what? Now, if you know fractions, then you might know what the answer is. But if you don't, then use your calculator, just kind of test it out. If you divide a number by 1/2, so I'm going to just use 6. 6 divided by, and this is going to be really tricky depending on your calculator. When you're going to input a fraction into a calculator, typically speaking, you're going to have to tell the calculator that it is a fraction. And some calculators have a fraction template that you can just grab. This one does, but for the sake of teaching, I'm going to show you how to type it in the long way. So I want to tell my calculator that I'm dividing by 1/2. So I already have 6 divided by. That's good. But now I need to tell my calculator that it's half. I can either type that in as 0.5, which is the equivalent, or I can type it in as a fraction. And the way that my calculator knows it's a fraction is because I've told it it's a fraction. I've used numeracy to tell it. So I'm saying this number inside the parentheses is a fraction and it's 1/2. So I'm saying I want to take 6 and I want to divide it by this number, 1/2. I'm going to hit enter and I got 12. So using these small numbers, we can conclude that when I divided 6 by 1/2, it would be the same as doing 6 times 2. So when you divide by 1/2, you're actually multiplying by 2. Whoops. And when I mentioned if you know fraction skills, then you'd know that because when you divide by a fraction, you flip it and multiply. And so when you flip 1/2, that becomes 2. Number 4, divide 0 by any number. 0 divided by any number. 0. Test it again. Test it again. I feel pretty confident in my solution, my answer, that it's 0. Now the next one is what I want to talk about. Divide any number by 0. So any number divided by 0. Uh-oh. Calculator error. Divide by 0. Okay, did I type it in wrong? Or is my calculator trying to tell me something? Let's try again, just in case. 4 divided by 0. One more try, just to confirm. Divided by 0. All right, so what's happening here is basically I'm leading you through this trial and error. I'm just making sure that like nothing's being typed in incorrectly, and it's not, because it's not that you can't divide by 0. It's just that if you try to divide by 0, there will not be a result. And I want to show you why, because I feel like it's important to your understanding. We're going to say does not exist. DNE, does not exist. And the reason that this does not exist is because let's look at a simple problem, 10 divided by 5. That's one I feel pretty good about, that we probably know off the top of our heads. 10 divided by 5 is 2. Why is it 2? Well, there's several ways to view that. One way, for the sake of this lesson, I'm going to show you, 5 times 2 is 10. Simple enough, right? How about 6 divided by 2? We know is 3, because 2 times 3 is 6. Now, I'm using a lot of 2's. That's not the point of the problem, but I'm just trying to show you some simple division. Now, let's further that. Let's take that a little bit further. And let's change that denominator to 0. 0 times what is 10? 0 times 0? No. 0 times 10? No. 0 times 100? No. 0 times anything? No. Nothing. There's nothing that exists that makes this true. And so that's why we say no solution or does not exist, basically because there is no unique solution that exists for that problem. And therefore we say we can't divide by 0. It's kind of weird wording, probably shouldn't use that wording, but that's what's happening. There's not a number. Okay, number 9, you might have gotten stumped on as far as typing it in. So I want to show you that on a graphing calculator. Excuse me. Let me see. It is not on my home screen. It's not on my home screen. I do see a square root. I'd have to use second to grab the square root like that, because it's an orange, but I don't see that third root. Now, if you know algebra, then you can use a workaround, but we're not going to get into algebra for this lesson necessarily. So I want to show you where it's hiding. On this calculator, it's hiding under the math menu. So if you look on the left side of my calculator, you'll see the word math. I'm going to hit that. And if you look down at number 4, it has that little itty bitty 3 with the radical symbol. That is third root. And then if you look at number 5, it has X with the radical symbol. X is for if you're going to do the 4th root or the 5th root or the 6th root and so on. But for this problem, we're just doing third root. So I'm going to grab number 4. And you can see it now in my home screen of the calculator. So I went to math, and then I grabbed it out of the math menu. And now I'm going to type in this number, 251515 316. And I get about 6.813. I'm going to do, whoops, about 813. And I did the squiggly equals because I rounded. And then number 10, 11, and 12, I want you to pay special attention to because of where the parentheses are. And if you've already typed it in, I want you to take note of the difference in those answers. So number 10, we just have a positive 3.45. Whoops. 3.45. Close the parentheses, square it. So, oh, I typed it in wrong. 0.45. square it. Okay. Technically speaking, since it's a positive number, we don't need those parentheses because it's not really going to change what's going on, and I'll show you that. But for the sake of this problem, since it already has the parentheses there, we're just going to leave it. Those parentheses aren't going to hurt anything, but I will show you without the parentheses for a positive number that we get the same result. So either one is fine, but we're going to leave it. I typed it wrong. Oh, wrote it wrong. 9025. For the next one, you'll notice that we have parentheses again, but there's a negative in there. So let's type that in. Negative goes inside the parentheses. Squared goes outside the parentheses. Yes, it does matter. And we get 11.9025 again. I'm not rounding, so I did do equals. And then now in the next problem, that parentheses is outside. And when you're not subtracting, you're just trying to tell the calculator negative. We're going to grab that little negative symbol by the enter sign that's in parentheses. Negative, parentheses, 3.45 squared. So let's see how this changes it. Ooh, we got a different answer. So what happens here is the calculator is taking into consideration order of operations. Your calculator is programmed to know that. But if you don't type it the right way, it won't know what you're talking about. So this one was specific. The negative sign was outside of the parentheses. So we're telling the calculator, hey, Mr. Calculator, I want to square this number, and then I want it to be negative. So the negative goes outside. But in the line before it, I was telling the calculator, hey, I've got a negative number and I want to square the entire negative number. So it does matter where the negative goes, and it does depend on whatever problem you're working on. So just be very careful about typing that in. So this one, we do get a negative. So generally speaking, anytime you square a number, no matter positive or negative, when you square a number, it will end up being positive. But if the negative is outside the parentheses, then it gets applied to the answer. And then number 13, I want to cover because in the problem, there are no parentheses. But depending on your calculator, you might have to tell the calculator where those go. Now, the reason why it matters is because I have a numerator, 10 minus 8, and I have a denominator, 4 times 5. And so I need to signify to my calculator some way that, hey, all this is in the top divided by all this is in the bottom. In order to do that, you can use parentheses. Now, like I said before, some calculators have a fraction function. This one does. I would do alpha x, and you can see it brings up that fraction function. And in that case, I don't have to worry about parentheses because it's in the problem. It's written exactly like the problem said. There's your answer. But let's say your calculator doesn't have that function, then we need to tell it this is in the numerator divided by this is in the denominator. And see, we got the same solution, which means that we typed it correctly. Now, if whatever you're working on wants a fraction answer, obviously we got a decimal, we can convert that. But if you want your calculator to do it for you, you're going to go to math. In number 1, it says arrow fraction. That means convert to fraction. So I'm going to grab that, hit enter, and there's fraction form. So that was math enter enter, or math 1 enter, depending. So there's some basic calculator skills to kind of show you how that works, and that typing it in the right way does make a difference. Part of that is having you understand what it is that you're actually looking for. So in the cases of the negatives and the squarings, you kind of have to know, you can't expect the calculator to know everything for you. You kind of have to know what you. So that's all I have for this lesson. I hope that you enjoyed it. you have any questions, please let me know. I'd be happy to help. See you in the next one.